At Newport Marina, a super yacht worth hundreds of millions sat dead in the water. 30 MIT engineers had spent weeks trying to revive it. Nothing worked. The boat remained silent, mocking them all. Victoria Harrington stood on the dock in her white silk blouse, arms crossed, surveying the crowd of onlookers and failed experts. Her gaze landed on a man in grease-stained coveralls, kneeling beside a small fishing boat. She walked over heels, clicking against wood. "If you're so smart," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "then fix my boat." The crowd laughed. Danny looked up, jaw tight. He said nothing. Danny wiped his hands on a rag and stood slowly. The laughter from the crowd still hung in the air. Victoria Harrington remained in front of him, waiting for a response, her expression unreadable, but her posture screaming superiority. Behind her, the Empress loomed like a beached whale, all gleaming white hull and dark windows that reflected nothing but money. Danny had seen boats like this before. He had built systems for boats like this before, a lifetime ago. He glanced past Victoria toward the small wooden dock where his son sat, cross-legged, earbuds and notebook open on his lap. Ryan was 12 years old and already solving calculus problems for fun. The boy didn't look up. He never did when things got tense. Danny had learned to read that as a survival instinct. The kid had inherited his mother's ability to disappear into thought when the world got loud. Victoria cleared her throat. "I'm waiting," she said. Her voice carried across the marina, sharp and clean, like a knife through silk. Danny met her eyes. They were cold. Not cruel, just indifferent. She didn't see him as a person. She saw him as a test subject, a way to prove a point to the engineers who had failed her, to the crowd that had gathered to watch the spectacle, to herself. Danny folded the rag and tucked it into his back pocket. "I'm not interested," he said quietly. His voice didn't carry the way hers did. It never had. He turned back toward the fishing boat. He had been working on a 30-year-old Grady White with a busted fuel line and an owner who paid in cash and didn't ask questions. Victoria stepped closer. The scent of expensive perfume cut through the smell of diesel and salt water. "You misunderstand," she said. "This isn't a request." Danny kept his back to her. He heard the shift in her tone, the entitled edge that people with money always had when they didn't get their way immediately. She continued, 30 engineers from MIT couldn't fix that boat. 30. They had access to every schematic, every technical manual, every diagnostic tool available, and it's still sitting there, dead. Danny didn't turn around. He crouched beside the Grady White and reached for a wrench. "Then maybe it's supposed to stay dead," he said. The crowd murmured. Someone laughed. Victoria's heels clicked twice on the dock, sharp and deliberate. "My father built that boat," she said. Her voice had changed. It was quieter now, but harder. "He built an empire on boats like that. And you're telling me it's supposed to stay dead?" Danny tightened a bolt and said nothing. He could feel her staring at the back of his head. He could feel the weight of the crowd's attention. He could feel Ryan's eyes on him now, too. The boy finally looking up from his notebook. Victoria stepped even closer. "I'll pay you $50,000, she said. The murmuring stopped. $50,000. Danny's rent was $800 a month. He was 2 months behind. Ryan needed new shoes. The power bill was overdue. $50,000 could change everything. He set the wrench down and stood. He turned to face her. Victoria's expression hadn't changed. She wasn't bluffing. She was stating a fact. Danny looked at the Empress again. It sat there in the water like a monument to excess, all smooth lines and tinted glass. He had worked on military vessels that cost less. 3 days, Victoria said. "You have 3 days to fix it. If you succeed, you get the money. If you fail, you leave this marina permanently." Danny is less than Unc is greater than Y's jaw tightened. "You don't own this marina," he said. Victoria smiled. It wasn't warm. "No," she said, "but my family does." The crowd shifted. A few people exchanged glances. Danny felt the trap closing around him. This wasn't about fixing a boat. This was about humiliation, about putting someone in their place, about reminding people like him where they stood in the world. Ryan's voice cut through the tension. "Dad?" Danny turned. His son was standing now, notebook clutched against his chest. The boy's face was pale. He knew what $50,000 meant. He also knew what leaving the marina meant. They had nowhere else to go. Ryan took a step forward. "You can do it," he said. His voice was steady, but his hands shook. Danny looked at his son, 12 years old and already carrying weight no kid should carry. Victoria glanced at Ryan, then back at Danny. "Cute kid," she said. There was no warmth in it, just observation. She pulled a business card from her pocket and held it out. Danny didn't take it. She set it on the edge of the dock beside him. 3 days, she repeated. Starting now. She turned and walked away, heels clicking in perfect rhythm. The crowd began to disperse, voices rising in speculation and gossip. Danny picked up the card. Thick paper, embossed lettering. Victoria Harrington, Chief Executive Officer, Harrington Yachts. He turned it over. On the back, written in pen, was a number 50,000. He slipped the card into his pocket and looked at Ryan. The boy was still standing there, notebook pressed against his chest like armor. "We don't have a choice, do we?" Ryan said. Danny walked over and put a hand on his son's shoulder. "We always have a choice," he said. Ryan looked up at him. "But we need the money." Danny nodded. "Yeah," he said. "We do." They stood there for a moment, father and son, while the marina slowly returned to normal around them. Boats rocked gently in their slips. Seagulls cried overhead. The Empress sat silent and still waiting. Danny looked at it again. He had avoided boats like this for years. Avoided the world they represented. Avoided the memories they carried. Ryan spoke again. "Why did she pick you?" Danny didn't answer right away. He didn't know how to explain it without explaining everything. Without opening doors he had sealed shut a long time ago. "I don't know," he said finally. It wasn't the truth, but it was easier. Ryan studied his father's face. The kid was too smart for his own good. He could read people the way Danny could read schematics. "You're lying," Ryan said softly. Danny squeezed his son's shoulder. "Yeah," he said. "I am." Ryan looked at the Empress. "Can you really fix it?" Danny let his hand drop. He picked up his toolbox and started walking toward the massive yacht. "I guess we're about to find out," he said. Ryan followed a few steps behind, quiet and watchful. They reached the boarding ramp. Up close, the Empress was even more imposing. The hull stretched 50 feet above the waterline. The deck was spotless white fiberglass. Everything gleamed. A security guard stood at the top of the ramp. He was young, broad-shouldered, and clearly briefed. "Miss Harrington said you'd be coming," the guard said. He stepped aside. Danny and Ryan climbed aboard. The deck was empty. No crew, no engineers, just silence. Danny set his toolbox down and looked around. The yacht was a masterpiece of design. Sleek, modern, efficient, and completely dead. Ryan walked to the control console near the helm. He ran his fingers over the touchscreen display. Nothing happened. "No power," he said. Danny nodded. "I can see that." He opened his toolbox and pulled out a multimeter. Ryan watched him work. "Dad," the boy said. Danny clipped the multimeter leads to a terminal. "What?" Ryan hesitated. "Why did you stop working on boats like this?" Danny didn't look up. The multimeter reading flickered and stabilized. 0 volts. He moved to the next terminal. Same result. "It's complicated," he said. Ryan sat down on a bench, bolted to the deck. "You always say that when you don't want to tell me something." Danny finished checking the third terminal and straightened. He looked at his son. The kid deserved better than half-truths. But the whole truth was a minefield Danny had been avoiding for years. "I used to work for the Navy," Danny said. Ryan's eyes widened. "You never told me that." Danny put the multimeter back in the toolbox. "There's a lot I never told you," he said. He walked to the hatch that led below deck. It was locked. He pulled a pick set from his pocket and knelt beside it. Ryan came over and crouched next to him. "What did you do in the Navy?" the boy asked. Danny worked the picks carefully. The lock was expensive, high-grade military spec. "I designed systems," he said. "Power distribution, control networks, navigation." The lock clicked. Danny pushed the hatch open. Below was darkness. He pulled a flashlight from his belt and clicked it on. The beam cut through the black, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the yacht's belly. Ryan followed him down. The air smelled sterile, recycled. The walls were lined with conduit and cable runs. Everything was labeled in crisp white text. Danny swept the flashlight across the space. At the far end was the main electrical panel. He walked toward it, boots echoing on the metal floor. Ryan stayed close. "If you design systems like this," the boy said, "then you should be able to fix it." Danny reached the panel and opened the cover. Inside was a maze of circuit breakers, relays, and junction blocks. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. He ran his fingers along the edges of the panel. "It's not about ability," he said. Ryan frowned. "Then what's it about?" Danny found what he was looking for. A small access port hidden behind a false panel. He popped it open. Inside was a control module, custom-built, sealed, and stamped with a logo he hadn't seen in over a decade. His breath caught. Ryan noticed. "What's wrong?" the boy asked. Danny stared at the module. The logo was simple, a stylized compass rose. Beneath it, 2 letters, DEM, his initials, his design, his work. He closed the access port and stepped back. Ryan grabbed his arm. "Dad, what is it?" Danny turned off the flashlight. The darkness swallowed them. "We need to leave," he said. His voice was flat. Ryan didn't move. "What? Wait." Danny pushed past him and headed for the stairs. Ryan chased after him. "Dad, talk to me." They climbed back onto the deck. The sunlight was blinding after the darkness below. Danny grabbed his toolbox and started toward the ramp. The security guard watched them go. Expression unreadable. Ryan caught up at the bottom of the ramp. "You can't just walk away," he said. Danny kept walking. "Watch me." Ryan planted himself in front of his father. "We need that money," he said. His voice cracked. Danny stopped. He looked down at his son. The kid's eyes were wet, not crying, just holding everything in the way he always did. Danny set the toolbox down. He knelt so they were eye level. "Some things aren't worth the price," he said. Ryan shook his head. "You always taught me to finish what I start." Danny didn't have an answer for that. The boy was right. He had taught him that. He had taught him a lot of things. And now those lessons were coming back to haunt him. Victoria's voice cut through the moment. "Leaving so soon?" Danny stood. She was walking toward them from the marina office, phone and hand expression somewhere between amused and irritated. She stopped a few feet away. "You've been on that boat for less than 20 minutes, she said. Danny picked up his toolbox. "I changed my mind," he said. Victoria tilted her head. "That's not how deals work." Danny started walking. Victoria called after him. "You leave now. You're out of the marina by tonight." Danny stopped. Ryan looked up at him, face pale. Victoria walked closer. "I own this place," she said. "Every slip, every dock, every square foot. You walk away from this. You walk away from everything." Danny turned to face her. "You're bluffing," he said. Victoria smiled. "Try me." They stared at each other. The marina sounds filled the silence. Water lapping, ropes creaking, seagulls calling. Ryan spoke quietly. "Dad." Danny looked down at his son. The boy's face was set, determined, scared. "Do it," Ryan said. "Whatever it takes." Danny felt the weight of the moment pressing down. He looked back at Victoria. She was waiting, confident, sure of herself. He thought about the module below deck, the logo, the initials, the trap he had just walked into without realizing it. He thought about his son, about the $800 rent, about the power bill, about shoes and school supplies, and a future that hung by a thread. He set the toolbox down. 3 days, he said. Victoria's smile widened. 3 days, she confirmed. Danny looked at the Empress. "I'll need full access. No restrictions, no supervision." Victoria considered this. "Fine," she said. "But if you damage anything, it comes out of your pay." Danny nodded. "Deal." Victoria turned and walked away. Danny stood there, toolbox at his feet, son beside him, and the weight of a past he couldn't escape, settling back onto his shoulders like an old coat he thought he'd thrown away. Day 1 started before dawn. Danny arrived at the marina while the sky was still dark, toolbox in one hand, thermos of coffee in the other. Ryan was with him. The boy had insisted on coming, said he wanted to help. Danny knew the real reason. Ryan was afraid his father would disappear into the past and not come back. The Empress waited in silence. No lights, no movement, just a massive shadow against the gray water. Danny climbed aboard. Ryan followed. They descended into the belly of the yacht without speaking. Danny set up work lights. The harsh white illumination filled the space, turning it stark and clinical. He opened the access port again and removed the control module. The compass rose logo stared back at him. Ryan leaned over his shoulder. "What is that?" he asked. Danny turned the module over in his hands. It was sealed with tamper-proof screws, military era. The kind that required special tools, the kind he used to carry. "It's the brain," Danny said. "Everything runs through this. Power distribution, navigation, communications, all of it." Ryan frowned. "So, if it's broken, the whole boat dies." Danny nodded. "That's the idea." He set the module on a work surface and opened his toolbox. Inside was a false bottom. He pried it up. Beneath were tools he hadn't touched in years. Precision drivers, circuit probes, diagnostic equipment that wasn't available to civilians. Ryan's eyes widened. "Where did you get those?" Danny selected a driver and began working on the module's casing. "I kept them," he said, "from before." The screws came out one by one. The casing separated. Inside was a circuit board dense, with components. Everything was labeled. Everything was organized. Everything was exactly how Danny would have designed it because he had designed it 15 years ago for the Navy for a project that was supposed to be classified for a system that was never supposed to exist outside military vessels. Ryan leaned in closer. "This is your work," he said. It wasn't a question. Danny stared at the board. His fingers traced the circuit paths. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It is." Ryan looked at his father. "How is that possible?" Danny didn't answer. He was already running through scenarios. Theft, corporate espionage, someone on the inside, someone who knew what he had built and how to replicate it. He pulled out a circuit probe and began testing voltage points. Everything read normal. The module wasn't damaged. It was doing exactly what it was designed to do, which meant the problem wasn't a malfunction. It was intentional. Ryan watched in silence for a while. Then he spoke. "You built a kill switch, didn't you?" D is less than Unk is greater than Y's hand stopped. He looked at his son. The boy's face was serious, analytical, too smart for his own good. "How did you know that?" Danny asked. Ryan shrugged. "It's what I would do if I designed something valuable and didn't want it stolen. I'd build in a way to shut it down remotely." Danny set the probe down. "You're right," he said. "I built in a fail-safe. If the system detects unauthorized use, it locks itself down permanently." Ryan's eyes widened. "So, this boat was never broken. It just knew it was stolen." Danny nodded. "And the only way to unlock it is with a code. A code only I have." They sat in silence. The work lights hummed. Somewhere above them, footsteps crossed the deck. Danny looked up. The footsteps stopped directly overhead. Then they moved toward the hatch. Victoria appeared at the top of the stairs. She was dressed in dark jeans and a gray sweater. No heels, no makeup. She looked younger, almost human. "Making progress?" she asked. Her voice echoed in the metal space. Danny covered the module with a rag. "Some," he said. Victoria descended the stairs. She moved carefully like someone not used to being on boats. She reached the bottom and looked around. Her gaze landed on the work lights, the tools, the exposed panels. 30 engineers couldn't figure this out, she said. "What makes you different?" Danny picked up the circuit probe. "I understand the system," he said. Victoria crossed her arms. The engineers had full schematics, complete technical documentation. They understood the system, too. Danny tested another voltage point. Understanding schematics isn't the same as understanding intent. he said. Victoria frowned. What does that mean? Danny set the probe down and looked at her. It means whoever designed this didn't just build a boat. They built a puzzle, and if you don't know the designer's mind, you can't solve it. Victoria studied him. You sound like you know the designer personally. Danny didn't respond. He turned back to the module. Victoria didn't move. She stood there, watching him work. The silence stretched. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Can I ask you something? He said to Victoria. She looked at him. Sure, she said. Ryan glanced at his father, then back at her. Why did you pick my dad? Victoria's expression didn't change. I didn't pick him, she said. I challenged him. There's a difference. Ryan shook his head. But you could have challenged any mechanic at the marina. Why him specifically? Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly, because everyone else was too scared to even try. She looked at Danny. Your father isn't scared. Or if he is, he hides it well. Danny kept working. Victoria continued. 30 engineers failed because they approached this like a normal system. They ran diagnostics. They checked connections. They replaced components. All textbook, all logical, and none of it worked. She walked closer to the work surface. So, I thought maybe the problem isn't logical. Maybe it's personal. Danny is less than Unc is greater than Y's jaw tightened. Victoria leaned against the bulkhead. My father built this company from nothing, she said. He wasn't an engineer. He was a businessman. He found people with talent, and he used them sometimes fairly, sometimes not. Danny looked up. What are you saying? Victoria met his gaze. I'm saying my father made a lot of enemies, people who had reasons to sabotage his work. Danny stood. You think someone sabotaged this boat? Victoria shrugged. I think it's possible, and I think if someone did, they'd need to understand the system intimately, inside and out. The implication hung in the air. Danny felt his heart rate increase. Victoria was fishing, trying to see if he'd reveal something. Ryan spoke up. My dad wouldn't sabotage anything. Victoria smiled. It wasn't warm. I didn't say he would, she said, but someone did. And I intend to find out who. She pushed off the bulkhead and headed for the stairs. You have 2 days left, she said. Then she was gone. Danny waited until her footsteps faded. Then he uncovered the module and pulled out his phone. He took pictures of the circuit board from multiple angles. Ryan watched. What are you doing? Danny transferred the photos to an encrypted folder. Research, he said. He put the phone away and reassembled the module. We're done here for today. Ryan looked confused. But you barely started. Danny packed up his tools. I need to verify something first. They left the yacht and walked back to their small apartment at the edge of the marina. It was a single room above a storage shed, barely 600 square ft. One bed that Ryan used. A couch Danny slept on, a hot plate, and a mini fridge. Ryan did homework at a card table while Danny sat on the couch with his laptop. He opened an encrypted partition and pulled up old files, project files, Navy files, things he wasn't supposed to have anymore. He found the folder labeled Compass Rose. Inside were hundreds of documents, schematics, code, test results, and a personnel list. He scrolled through the names. Most were people he barely remembered, engineers he had worked alongside but never knew well. Then he saw a name that made him stop. Thomas Harrington, Chief Technology Consultant. Danny stared at the name, Thomas Harrington, Victoria's father. He clicked on the file. Inside was a profile, age 53 at the time, former Navy contractor, brought on to oversee commercial applications of military technology. Danny remembered him now, a smooth talker, always in expensive suits, always asking questions, always taking notes. Danny had given him access to everything because that was his job. Because Thomas Harrington had the clearance, because Danny had trusted him. Ryan looked up from his homework. You okay? Danny closed the laptop. No, he said. Ryan set his pencil down. What did you find? Danny rubbed his face. Proof, he said. Proof that I'm an idiot. Ryan came over and sat on the couch beside him. What happened? Danny opened the laptop again and showed his son the personnel file. Ryan read it, his expression darkened. He stole your work. Danny nodded. He had access to everything, all the research, all the designs. He was supposed to help transition the technology for commercial use. Instead, he copied it and built his empire on it. Ryan looked at his father. Can you prove it? Danny closed the laptop. Not legally. The project was classified. All the documentation is sealed. And even if I could prove it, I'd be violating about a dozen federal laws just by admitting I worked on it. They sat in silence. Outside, boats creaked in their slips. Water lapped against the docks. Ryan spoke quietly. So, what do you do? Danny stood and walked to the small window. The Empress was visible in the distance, lit by security lights. I fixed the boat, he said, because if I don't, we lose everything. Ryan joined him at the window. And then, what? Danny didn't have an answer. Day 2 started the same way. Before dawn, toolbox and coffee, Ryan beside him. They boarded the Empress in silence, descended into its belly, set up the work lights. Danny opened the module again. This time, he wasn't just looking. He was documenting. He photographed every component, every circuit trace, every label. He compared them against the files on his laptop. The match was perfect. Not similar, not inspired by. Perfect. Thomas Harrington hadn't just stolen the concept. He had stolen the exact design down to the component level. Ryan sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop, open, running comparisons. It's the same, he said. All of it. Even the serial numbers on some of the chips match the procurement records from your old project. Danny nodded. He was running a different analysis, looking for the kill switch trigger. It took him 3 hours to find it, hidden in the communication subsystem, a small piece of code that checked for an authentication signal every 72 hours. If the signal wasn't present, the system shut down. There, Danny said. He pointed at the screen. Ryan leaned over. What is it? Danny highlighted a block of code. The fail-safe. It's waiting for a specific transmission, a code only I know. Without it, the system thinks it's been compromised and locks everything down. Ryan frowned. So, you just send the code, and it unlocks. Danny shook his head. It's not that simple. The code is biometric. It requires my voice print and a physical key. Ryan looked at his father. Do you still have the key? Danny reached into his pocket and pulled out an old compass. It was tarnished, worn. The kind sailors used before GPS. He opened it. Inside, glued to the back of the cover, was a small chip. I've carried this every day for 15 years, Danny said. Just in case. Ryan stared at it. So, you can unlock it right now. Danny closed the compass. Yeah, he said. I can. But he didn't move. He sat there, holding the compass, staring at the module. Ryan watched him. What's wrong? Danny's voice was quiet. If I unlock this, I prove that Thomas Harrington stole my work. That his entire empire is built on stolen technology. That every boat he ever sold is based on a classified military design. Ryan nodded slowly, and Victoria finds out her father was a thief. Danny looked at his son. More than that, if this goes public, the Navy will get involved. There'll be investigations, lawsuits, criminal charges. The whole company could collapse. Ryan processed this. You're saying if you fix the boat, you destroy everything Victoria has? Danny nodded. And if I don't fix it, we lose our home and the $50,000. They sat in silence, the weight of the choice pressing down. Footsteps on the deck above. Both of them looked up. The hatch opened, but it wasn't Victoria. It was a man in his 60s. Cess, gray hair, expensive suit. He descended the stairs slowly, carefully. When he reached the bottom, he smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. You must be Danny, the man said. His voice was smooth, practiced. Danny stood. Who are you? The man extended his hand. James Porter. I was Thomas Harrington's attorney. Now I represent the estate. Danny didn't shake his hand. James lowered it. Victoria doesn't know I'm here, he said. I wanted to speak with you privately. Danny crossed his arms. About what? James glanced at the module on the work surface. About how much you know, he said. Ryan stood up. James noticed him. And this must be your son. Ryan, isn't it? Danny stepped between them. Leave him out of this. James raised his hands. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to make you an offer. Danny is less than unk, is greater than wise eyes narrowed. What kind of offer? James pulled an envelope from his jacket. $100,000 cash. You walk away from this boat. Tell Victoria it can't be fixed, and you never speak about what you found. Danny stared at the envelope. $100,000. 2 years of rent. Ryan's education. A new start somewhere else. James set the envelope on the work surface. Thomas Harrington made mistakes, he said, but he built something real, employed thousands of people, created value. Do you really want to destroy all that over pride? Danny is less than unk, is greater than wise. Jaw tightened. It's not about pride. It's about what's right. James smiled. Right and wrong are expensive concepts, especially for people in your position. He glanced at Ryan. You have a son to think about, a future to secure. $100,000 can do a lot of good. Danny picked up the envelope. He held it for a moment. Then he handed it back to James. Get off this boat, he said. James didn't take the envelope. Think about it, he said. You have until tomorrow morning. He turned and climbed the stairs. Danny watched him go. Ryan spoke quietly. You should have taken it. Danny looked at his son. What? Ryan's voice was steady. We need the money. And he's right. Fixing this boat will destroy people's lives. People who didn't do anything wrong. Danny set the envelope down. Ryan, that money is hush money. It's a bribe to cover up the truth. Ryan met his father's eyes. I know, but we're not heroes, Dad. We're just trying to survive. The words hit harder than Danny expected. Because Ryan was right. They weren't heroes. They were poor. They were desperate. They were hanging on by a thread. And here was a lifeline. $100,000. All they had to do was walk away. Danny sat down on the floor. He put his head in his hands. Ryan sat beside him. They stayed like that for a long time. Finally, Danny spoke. Your mother would have taken the money, he said. Ryan looked at him. Really? Danny nodded. She was practical. Always said pride doesn't feed a family. Ryan thought about this. But you're not going to take it, are you? Danny lifted his head. No, he said. I'm not. Ryan smiled slightly. I didn't think so. Danny looked at his son. You think I'm making a mistake? Ryan shook his head. I think you're being you, he said. And that's not a mistake. They sat together, in the belly of the yacht, surrounded by stolen technology and impossible choices. Above them, the marina went about its business. Boats came and went, people lived their lives, and Danny prepared to unlock a secret that would change everything. Day 3 arrived cold and gray. Danny woke on the couch before sunrise. Ryan was already awake, sitting at the card table with his laptop open. The boy looked up when his father stirred. I've been thinking, Ryan said. Danny sat up and rubbed his face. About what? Ryan turned the laptop around. On the screen was a list of names. Employees of Harrington Yachts. Hundreds of them. All these people will lose their jobs if the company collapses, Ryan said. Danny stood and walked to the window. The Empress sat in the water waiting. I know, he said. Ryan closed the laptop. But you're still going to do it. It wasn't a question. Danny nodded. Yeah, he said. I am. Ryan joined him at the window. Why? Danny looked down at his son. Because if I don't, I teach you that the truth doesn't matter. That right and wrong are negotiable. That you can steal from people and get away with it as long as you're rich enough. Ryan considered this. Mom wouldn't agree. Danny smiled sadly. No, he said. She wouldn't. They stood together in silence. Then Danny grabbed his toolbox. Come on, he said. Let's finish this. They walked to the Empress through the pre-dawn darkness. The marina was quiet. No one else was awake. They boarded the yacht and descended below deck. Danny set up the work lights one last time. He cleared his throat, opened the module, and connected his diagnostic equipment. Ryan sat beside him. What happens when you unlock it? Danny pulled out the old compass. The system will reactivate full power, full functionality, and it will log the unlock event with a timestamp and my biometric signature. Ryan understood. So, there will be proof that you're the one who designed it. Danny nodded. The Navy will be able to trace it back to the original project. It won't take them long to figure out what happened. He opened the compass and removed the chip. It was smaller than a fingernail. He inserted it into a port on the module. The screen on his diagnostic equipment flickered. A prompt appeared. Voice authentication required. Danny leaned toward the microphone. Authorization code Delta Mike 7439er, he said. His voice was steady, clear. The system processed it. A progress bar filled slowly. Then the screen changed. Authentication successful. System unlocked. The work lights dimmed for a moment. Then the yacht came alive. A low hum vibrated through the hull. Indicator lights blinked on across the control panels. Screens flickered to life. The Empress was breathing again. Ryan stared around them. It worked, he said. Danny disconnected his equipment. Yeah, he said. It worked. He packed up his tools slowly. Each item went back into its place with deliberate care. Ryan watched him. What now? Danny closed the toolbox. Now we wait. They climbed back to the deck. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky orange and pink. The yacht's running lights were on. The control displays glowed. Everything was operational. Danny sat on a bench near the helm. Ryan sat beside him. They didn't speak. They just watched the sunrise. Footsteps on the dock below. Then, on the boarding ramp, Victoria appeared. She was dressed for business, dark suit, hair pulled back. She stopped when she saw the lights. Her expression shifted from skepticism to shock. She walked to the control console and touched the screen. It responded. She pressed another button. The engines hummed to life. She turned to Danny. You fixed it, she said. Her voice was flat, controlled. Danny nodded. I did. Victoria looked at the displays, at the running lights, at the yacht that had been dead for weeks. How? She asked. Danny stood. I understood the system, he said, like I told you. Victoria's eyes narrowed. That's not an answer. Danny picked up his toolbox. It's the only answer you're getting. He headed for the ramp. Victoria stepped in front of him. I paid you to fix this boat. I deserve to know how you did it. Danny met her gaze. You paid me $50,000, which I haven't received yet. Victoria pulled out her phone. I'll transfer it right now. She tapped the screen a few times. Dai's phone buzzed. He checked it. $50,000 had just appeared in his account. Victoria put her phone away. Now tell me how you fixed it. Danny stepped around her. Read the system logs, he said. They'll tell you everything you need to know. He walked down the ramp. Ryan followed. Victoria called after them. What logs? Danny didn't turn around. Your father kept detailed records of everything. Check the authentication database. Look for compass rose. He kept walking. Victoria stood on the deck, watching them go. They made it halfway across the marina before the shouting started. Danny turned. Victoria was running toward them, phone in hand, face pale. She stopped a few feet away, breathing hard. What the hell did you do? She demanded. Danny set his toolbox down. I unlocked the system. Victoria held up her phone. The screen showed a government website. Department of Defense. Office of Naval Intelligence. This says Compass Rose is a classified military project, she said. Her voice shook. This says my father was under investigation for technology theft. Danny said nothing. Victoria's hand dropped. The phone hung loose at her side. You knew, she said. You knew this whole time. Danny nodded. Yeah, he said. I knew. Victoria's face hardened. Why didn't you tell me? Danny looked at her. Really looked at her. Saw the anger, the betrayal, the fear. Would you have believed me? He asked. Victoria didn't answer. She looked down at her phone again. The investigation was closed, she said. Insufficient evidence. My father was never charged. Danny picked up his toolbox because he had good lawyers and because I didn't testify. Victoria looked up. Why not? Danny's jaw tightened. Because I had a newborn son and a wife who was sick. Because I couldn't afford to fight. Because I was tired. He started walking again. Victoria grabbed his arm. Wait, she said. Danny stopped. Victoria let go. I'm sorry, she said. The words came out quiet, almost inaudible. Danny turned to face her. For what? Victoria gestured at the yacht, at the marina, at everything. For all of it. For what my father did. For how I treated you. Danny studied her face. The anger was gone. What remained was something closer to grief. Your apology doesn't change anything, he said. Victoria nodded. I know. They stood there in the early morning light. Ryan shifted uncomfortably beside his father. Victoria looked at the boy. You must think I'm terrible, she said. Ryan shook his head. I think you didn't know, he said. And that's not the same thing. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She wiped them away quickly. The Navy will come for the boat, she said. Won't they? Danny nodded. Probably, along with any other vessel using the same technology. Victoria laughed bitterly. That's all of them. Every yacht we've built in the last 10 years. Danny didn't respond. Victoria looked at the Empress. My father built an empire on stolen work, she said. And I inherited it without knowing. She turned back to Danny. What would you do if you were me? Danny thought about it. I'd tell the truth, he said. I'd contact the Navy. I'd cooperate with the investigation. And I'd figure out how to make it right. Victoria wiped her eyes again. That'll destroy the company wheel, she said. Danny nodded. Probably. Victoria took a deep breath. But it's the right thing to do. Danny picked up his toolbox. Yeah, he said, it is. Victoria straightened her shoulders. The grief was still there, but something else had joined it. Resolve. I'll need your help, she said to explain the technology to work with the investigators. Danny hesitated. Victoria continued. I'll pay you a fair rate, consultant fees. Danny looked at Ryan. The boy nodded slightly. Danny turned back to Victoria. Okay, he said, but on one condition. Victoria waited. The yacht, Danny said. Once the investigation is done, I want you to convert it. Victoria frowned. Convert it to what? Danny looked at the Empress. A rescue vessel. Something that helps people instead of just showing off wealth. Victoria followed his gaze. That's actually a good idea, she said. Danny nodded. I have them sometimes. Victoria almost smiled. I'm starting to see that. She extended her hand. Danny shook it. Her grip was firm, genuine. 3 months later, Danny stood on the deck of the Empress. It didn't look the same. The luxurious furnishings were gone. In their place were medical supplies, rescue equipment, and communication systems. The yacht had been repurposed, reborn. It would spend its days responding to distress calls along the coast, saving lives instead of stroking egos. Ryan climbed aboard, carrying a box of supplies. The boy was taller now, growing fast. He set the box down and joined his father at the rail. You think it'll work? Ryan asked. Danny looked at the equipment being loaded, at the crew being trained, at Victoria directing operations from the dock. Yeah, he said. I think it will. Ryan pulled something from his pocket. The old compass. Danny's compass. You left this at the apartment, Ryan said. He held it out. Danny took it. The metal was warm from being in Ryan's pocket. He opened it. The chip was gone, removed by Navy investigators, but the compass still worked. The needle still pointed north. Keep it, Danny said. He handed it back to Ryan. The boy looked surprised. Really? Danny nodded. You'll need it more than I will. Ryan held the compass carefully. For what? Danny put a hand on his son's shoulder. For finding your way, he said. When things get complicated, when you're not sure what's right, Let it remind you that there's always a true direction, even when everything else is spinning. Ryan closed the compass and slipped it into his pocket. Thanks, Dad. They stood together watching the sun climb higher. Victoria walked up the boarding ramp. She looked tired but determined. We're almost ready, she said. Danny nodded. Good. Victoria looked at the yacht, at what it had become. My father would hate this, she said. Danny smiled slightly. Probably. Victoria smiled. Too. Good, she said. The Empress set out on its first mission a week later. Danny wasn't aboard. He was back at the marina, working on a fishing boat with a leaky hull. Simple work. Honest work. Ryan sat nearby doing homework. The boy looked up occasionally, watching his father work. The compass sat on the table beside his textbooks, a reminder of true north. A reminder that sometimes the hardest choice is the right one, and sometimes fixing what's broken means tearing everything down and starting.